Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're back out at the range with the Intratec KG9. Now this little handgun, actually we did a video on one of these. It's actually Jason's gun. I have several myself, and we did just a crazy gun video, off the cuff, indoor range. It was snowing outside, and it wound up being a really popular video, so I thought I would come back, revisit the KG9, and give you guys a little bit more history about the gun and why I find it so interesting and why both Jason and I like to collect them. The guns that we brought out today does not represent all of the KG9s that we have or the variations thereof, but I wanted to give you a sampling of the guns. Now the gun that I'm holding right now is technically a KG9. It says right on the side, Intratec, Miami, Florida, 9mm Luger Mod Tech-9. Now this gun started life as a KG9. It was designed by a Swedish company, and it was called Intradynamic. And Intradynamic AB, which was the Swedish company, became Intradynamic USA, which first started to import the KG9s, but then the KG9s had a problem we'll talk about. Wasn't really a problem, but it became a problem for the US government, and then they renamed them to the KG9 when they changed the design. The KG9 became the best known of all the names that were ultimately given to this gun. Now the KG9 is a polymer framed handgun. It has the magazine in front of the pistol grip, has a barrel shroud, which the anti-gunners just love. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a little thing that goes up here in the stock, but it does have that evil barrel shroud, and it does have a threaded barrel, even though the threads go back underneath the shroud and really are there for more or less cosmetic purposes. But it fires from a 30-round magazine. And this is a 9mm, and it is a closed bolt handgun. Now we have some Fiocchi 9mm loaded into this gun. You can pick up the Fiocchi 9mm over from our friends at Freedom Munitions. They don't just sell their own ammunition, but they sell other brands of ammunition as well over at Freedom. And this is from our friends at Freedom. So I'm going to go ahead and put the magazine into the gun, locks in place. I'm going to pull the bolt to the rear. You'll notice that the bolt goes back home. And now the gun is ready to fire. Now the proper way to fire this is to hold it by the magazine or hold it here. Keep your fingers away from the ejection port, and definitely keep your fingers away from that muzzle. So I'm going to hold it by the magazine down here, and my challenge target, I'm just going to kind of gank with my gat. So here we go. All right, so there you go. The bolt closes, does not lock open on the last round fired, and it's firing from a closed bolt. These guns were extremely affordable. These guns only cost a couple $100. They weren't exactly known for their quality or their reliability, but the original KG9 submachine gun was designed in the hopes of actually getting a military contract. Let's take a look at the early KG9, because yes, I actually do have one, but it's a semi-automatic. Let's check it out. This is the Intradynamic Miami, Florida 9mm Luger Mod KG9. Now you'll notice, first of all, it has a bolt that's in the white. The major difference between the KG9 and then what would become the KG99, which I have here, I will show you, and then the KG9, the biggest difference between this, the original design, is the fact that this gun fires from an open bolt. Bolt locks to the rear. When you pull the trigger, bolt slams home, strips around from the magazine, fires, comes back, and cocks itself. Now this is a semi-automatic. Open bolts were designed for machine guns, and people ask, well, why do they fire from an open bolt? What's the advantage? The gun's open to the elements, and yes, it is. That's one of the trade-offs. But when you're dealing with a machine gun that's being shot a lot, especially in rifle calibers, not so much in 9mm calibers and pistol calibers, it would take an awful lot of shooting to get this gun to cook off. But when you're talking about belt-fed machine guns and stuff like that, centerfire rifles, open bolt machine guns are used because they don't want to have a live round in a red hot chamber that can cause what we call a cook-off. the chamber is so hot, it ignites the powder in the case and causes the gun to run away until you break that belt, get the magazine out of it or whatever. It's just going to continue to fire because the chamber is so stinking hot. Open bolt guns avoid that. It doesn't chamber around until it fires. Now, it's a really popular way to make guns, especially during World War II. Most of the machine guns that were pistol calibered out of World War II and World War I were open bolt designs. The KG9 is no different. Now, the KG9 would have been a full auto. It was imported for a short time as a KG9 semi-automatic, and you can see now that I have a magazine inserted into it. The bolt is locked to the rear. It's in the fire position. If I want to put the gun on safe, you have a notch here. This is common with open bolts. You'll pull the bolt to the rear and rotate it up into that recess, and that makes the gun safe. If it were to be dropped, the gun can't fire. Open bolt machine guns are known for being very dangerous in terms of having the bolt to the rear and dropping them. You don't want to do that. So to make the gun safe for carry, you would carry it like this to ready it. You would simply pull it back, drop it down to its firing sear. And now when this gun fires, watch what happens. The bolt will go home, strip around, fire it, and then lock itself back to the rear. See? Every time I pull the trigger, it locks open just like that. So you can tell this gun's ready to go simply because you can see the round in there, and this sucker means business. Now, this one hip fires very well as well. So when you hip fire it 80 style, you can gank the target with your gat with this one just as effectively. And then, of course, when the gun runs empty, the bolt goes home. The gun has a flapper release right here. There's been some changes to the internal design, the external design between the different models. Now, the KG9 in 1984, this gun and many guns like it. I have another open bolt gun here, a couple of them I'm going to show to you. In 1984, the ATF decided that we were no longer to be trusted with these because an open bolt semi-automatic is very easy to convert to a machine gun. I'm not going to tell you guys how to do it. I'm not going to be irresponsible and say this is how you convert a KG9 to a machine gun. I'd rather you guys not do that because it's a dumb thing to spend 10 years in federal prison for. But people were doing it, and the ATF got flustered, got mad, and through the stroke of a pen in 1984 made open bolt firearms illegal to manufacture and sell in the United States. However, original guns like this one were grandfathered, and we could keep them. So let's take a look at the KG9, the KG99, the gun that came after this. We've already shown you the Tech 9, and I want to show you a couple of other open bolt guns I think you'll enjoy. One of the most popular open bolt guns of the 80s would have to be the Mac-10. The name is just iconic. This is one of them right here. This is an open bolt RPB semi-automatic. These things were iconic with their little folding stocks that went over the top on the full auto guns. They had the threaded barrels for the psionic suppressors. We have some very cool pictures from the Vietnam era of Navy SEALs using these things. These things are really, really cool guns. They called them room brooms. These things had a cyclic rate of around 1,200 rounds a minute and 45 ACP on the full auto version. Now, the semi-automatics, obviously, they only fire as fast as you pull the trigger. But these were really affordable to produce, following in that World War II theme of using a bunch of stampings and producing machine guns for as little as possible. And the gun used grease gun magazines that were modified. Magazine goes into the pistol grip, and this is a heavy tank of a gun, guys. It has a selector lever here for fire and safe. The machine gun would have, let me see if I can do this safely. The machine gun would have another selector over here for semi and full. This one just has fire and safe because it is a semi-automatic. Now, I don't have the front strap on it. You want to be careful with these things, guys, because it's really easy to shoot yourself in the hand with these, especially the full autos. People will get a hold of these things and fire them, and they have a ton of recoil, and they fire very, very quickly, and people get into trouble with these very quickly with the fully automatic ones. Now, the semi-automatics should fire only one shot for every pull of the trigger. And here we go. Real quickly, guys, If you would like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel, the best possible way to do that is to directly support us over at Patreon. At Patreon, you guys support us directly in return. We try to give some stuff back to you guys. We do original blog posts, we post behind the scenes information, we answer all of your private messages, but we also do things like give away $300 in ammunition every single month. Our friends over at Freedom Munitions give us that $300 to give away, so 3 lucky Patreons get $100 in ammunition every month, and you can use it to buy whatever ammunition on their website. And they don't just sell their own ammo, they sell other brands as well. Our friends over at Forge from Freedom, who make our Mac t-shirts, they give away 5 t-shirts every month to 5 lucky patrons, and again, you can pick whatever style of shirt that you want. But if you're a squad leader or above, you get special pricing over on the Copper Custom website on select items. But all of our Patreons will post coupon codes every once in a while, once or twice a month, so all of our patrons can get a blowout deal on something like a flashlight, red dot sights, firearms, all sorts of cool stuff, bags, rests, things like that. So that's how we try to give back to you guys for directly supporting us over on Patreon, because YouTube has demonetized us, and they're doing it not just to gun channels, but to airsoft channels, to knife channels, the gaming channels. So that's how we've decided to move forward, and that's through direct support from you guys. But also, guys, please consider supporting other folks out there that are content creators that you regularly consume their content as well, and they have Patreon pages. Please consider supporting them as well. Thanks, guys. We do appreciate that support. So I explained to you guys how the KG9 was the original design, and that how we had Interdynamic AB, a Swedish company, moving to the United States, setting up an import company called Interdynamic USA. They brought in the original KG9 when the ATF in 1984 said no more open bolts. They redesigned it. This gun that I'm holding now is a KG99. It came before the Tech 9, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute, why there were so many different names. But this is the KG99. So this would have been the very first gun that they came to market with after open bolts were banned. So they just added a 9 to the nomenclature. It was still being imported by Interdynamic. Intratech still hadn't come about. I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but George from Keltec was actually involved in the Intratech days in designing and importing this gun in some way before he founded Keltec. I just recently discovered that myself. Okay, so this is the KG99. This one is the closed bolt. You'll notice the bolt does not lock to the rear. You will notice that I can push the charging handle down and lock this gun. Now this KG99 doesn't work the best. This is the one of my Tech 9 variants that doesn't run all that well. We have the same Fiocchi ammunition in it. I'm gonna go ahead and charge it. I'm gonna fire the gun for you here, and we may experience a malfunction. The rest of my guns seem to work well. There are people out there, and we can even do it ourselves at Copper Custom, that can modify them, clean them up, and get them to run right, but they're just kind of junky guns, right? They were intended to be very, very affordable and cheap to produce. All right, let's see how well the KG99 works. Now you heard a click and no bang. It kind of sort of didn't pick up a round out of the magazine. It's kind of sort of not picking up a round at all. I think the magazine kind of dropped out. Let's try once again. Ow, it has this little foot on it right there, and I just whapped that with the palm of my hand. Okay, the magazine seems to be in. Yeah. And this is the typical issue you would have with a Tech 9. And there we go, nice stovepipe malfunction. And this is why they were, for the most part, considered junk guns. And there we go, another stovepipe malfunction. And another stovepipe and a live round. And there we go, there's unique malfunction. And yeah, that's it. So that's the KG99. As you can see, when they converted it from an open bolt to a closed bolt, they were really successful in designing a really reliable, affordable handgun. Not. So this gun evolved into the Tech 9. They made some changes to the gun. They reinforced some of the polymers back here. They changed some of the internal components. They changed the sights around to reduce the cost of manufacturing, and they kept changing the names. Let's take a look at some of the other guns that we have out here this afternoon, and let's have a conversation about some of the changes they made to the KG9, 99, Tech 9, and why those changes were made. All right, guys, here it is, my favorite open bolt handgun from history, the 380 Cobra Mac-10. Guys, look at how tiny this little guy is. Now, what's kind of funny is people look at these and they think that they're cheap or poorly made. What's funny is the guns are actually fairly well made and reliable. Even this little 380 in its military full auto configuration would have a little folding stock that folds over the top. It fires from an open bolt, of course, has its selector lever there, and if it were full auto, it would have a full auto selector lever over here. Again, it's a semi-automatic open bolt. We're using some 380 Freedom Munitions ammo. It has a flat nose on it. That's not ideal for these open bolt or any submachine gun. The feed ramps are really designed for full ball ammunition. We may encounter a couple of hiccups here, but it should work okay. So here we go with my little 380. I'm just going to fire this little guy one-handed. Look how tiny it is. Isn't it cool? I love this little thing. There we go. Such a neat little gun. Very simple, robust, and the open bolt concept rocks. I love it because it's an original military design. It just looks really cool when you put a magazine into the weapon and cock it. It's just so iconic, and it sucks that the ATF took it away from us. Stroke of a pen and a bureaucrat, guys. That's what we get when we have government agencies running amok with our rights. All right, let's talk more about the Tech 9s and the history of those guns. So as I mentioned, the KG9, which I have right here, is the first of the guns to be designed and brought into the United States. You can tell that the logoing will change when it goes from intradynamic to intratech. And so intradynamic has this little circle, almost crosshair looking logo, again with the KG99 right next to it, the closed bolt version of the open bolt. You see the logo's the same. And then when they went to I want to make sure I pronounce it right. Intratech, interdynamic intratech, you'll notice the logo changed. Now, most everything else is about the same. If you look at the pinholes, even here on the open bolt, the pinholes are the same. I'm not going to take these guns apart. There's plenty of videos out there how to do that. They're kind of a pain in the rear end to take apart. And in the case of the older guns, you want to be careful about shooting them, the KG99s and the KG9s, because the polymer is getting old and brittle, and it's very easy to crack this polymer, so they're not really shooters anymore. But some of the other things that they changed besides the open bolt, now you can see when I pull the bolt to the rear on this one, there is no manual safety. The only safety is to pull this bolt to the rear and rotate it up into its locking recess. That's its only safety. But you'll notice that it has dovetailed sights, real sights on the gun. But you'll also notice it does not have a threaded barrel, but it does have a barrel shroud and two sling loops here. All right, so in 1984, ATF said no more of those, too easy to convert to a machine gun, so they redesigned the gun to a closed bolt. All right, and so you'll notice the bolt no longer locks to the rear. Now it's striker fired. Instead of holding the entire bolt to the rear, it's just holding a striker to the rear, and this became the KG99. Now you'll notice that this gun still has a dovetailed rear sight, still has a machined front sight post here. You know, our sling swivels, very little changed externally. You'll notice that there's spot welds on top here holding the front block in the gun between the KG9 and the KG99. Very little changed between these two, with the exception of them designing it with a striker assembly. But there are a number of these guns being used in gang violence and violence just in general. These guns were showing up in street crimes. And so people started to, or legislators started to try to ban these guns by name. So they banned the KG99, they banned the KG9 in certain jurisdictions. There were federal bans, the assault weapons ban. All those bans that happened, almost every single ban that occurred in any state or at a federal level that had a list of guns that were banned, the KG9 and the KG99 were included. So they changed the name and the name of the company. They went from interdynamic to interdynamic to intratech, and they renamed it to the Tech 9. And this gun, you'll notice now, compared to the KG9, you'll notice that the dovetailed rear sight's no longer there. It's just a piece of sheet metal with a V-notch cut in it that's spot welded to the top of the receiver. The front post is just a piece of sheet metal that's shaped and spot welded to the front. They've reduced production costs. You'll notice it still has its sling swivels and stuff like that. The polymer lower, a lot of the stuff internally has changed very little, but you'll notice here you have indentations versus welds holding various parts and components together. Again, they're looking at ways to reduce cost to keep the price of the gun low. But the gun kept being used in crime. Matter of fact, these guns were infamously used, or variations of these guns, in the Columbine shooting. And so once again, they went after the Tech-9. They started banning the Tech-9 by name. And so this is also the reason why the anti-gunners today hate barrel shrouds, because they associate it with the Tech-9, which they hate. They don't like magazines that are in the forward position of the pistol grip like this, which allows you to shoot it like that. They claim that that makes it an assault weapon. They would rather have the magazine in the pistol grip like a standard handgun. These are all features that various assault weapons bans over the years have sought to ban. Threaded barrels, barrel shrouds, and a lot of that stuff, guys, comes from the Tech-9 and the anti-gunners' absolute hatred of the gun. It went on to be renamed again when the Tech-9 was banned. They made them even smaller and they called them an AB-10. I have one. I didn't bring it out this afternoon. But there are multiple different variations of this gun where they kept renaming it and changing the features to try to get around all the various bans. And so that's why we have so many different variations of the Tech-9 pistol. It's because they were being used in crime and they were trying to get rid of them and they were banning them by name and all sorts of stuff, and it just became the poster child for gang violence. And so that's why they kept trying to ban them and change the names on them. One thing I wasn't very clear about when talking about open bolts earlier in the video is the fact that if you look inside here, you'll notice on the face of the bolt, you'll see the ejector sticking out, but you'll also see something you don't normally see, and that's the firing pin. The firing pin on an open bolt is typically fixed. This one is machined into the bolt face. Other open bolt guns may have a firing pin that's pinned in place, that's replaceable, but in this case, it's machined into the bolt face. But what that means is when you pull the trigger, the bolt slams home, strips around, and as soon as that bolt closes, at the moment of closing, that firing pin hits the primer, starts the ignition process, and causes the gun to cycle and sets it up for the next shot. So that's how open bolts work. Bang, bolt slams home, and that fixed firing pin ignites the primer. Now, I wanted to bring the guns out and show them to you today because open bolts have been off the market since 1984, and they were taken away from us with a bureaucrat's pen. It was decided that by the ATF, open bolts were no longer of sporting purpose because people were misusing them, they say, and making illegal machine guns, and they were too easily converted to machine guns. So ATF just decided one day to wake up and ban open bolts and make them illegal in 1984. Now, if you follow the channel, you'll know that I believe all federal gun laws are illegal, and I don't appreciate the fact that the ATF just wakes up one morning and decides something's not sporting purpose. I hate that clause in the 1968 Gun Control Act. Thank you, NRA. But they use that to beat us over the head, and that's how they take away things like open bolt semi-automatics. But we should be able to have machine guns as well. I'm not going to get into that. You guys know how I feel about it. But it's really interesting to note that the Tech-9 was developed as an affordable submachine gun that originally had military aspirations in Sweden. It wound up on the US market being a very affordable, poorly made handgun in the end. By the time we got to the Tech-9 and the AB-10s, they even made these in .22 caliber, believe it or not. You know, the guns were just known for being of really low quality. They were popular, or so we were told by the media, to be used by criminals, you know, street gangs involved in the drug trade, whatever. The Tech-9 became kind of the poster child for street crime, and the anti-gunners went after it with a vengeance, which is why they changed the name so many times, including the company name. And yeah, and now it's just a piece of history. In 2001, the company went defunct, and now we just have these cool little collector's pieces to play with. Now, what's interesting is that my other guns all had some sort of a problem out here today in the cold, be it problems with the bullet shape. These guns definitely like ball rounds. All right, open bolt guns, Tech 9s in general, even the Macs, prefer ball rounds. They don't like hollow points. They don't like blunted noses like we had on the 380s. So they can be very particular about the ammunition that you use in them. Now, when you're using ball ammunition, it seems like they run fairly well. The KG9, as you guys saw, doesn't work at all. That gun needs some work on it. But my little open bolt, the original KG9, with 115 grain Fiocchi ammunition ball, has never had a hiccup. Let's see if that holds true with this last magazine. I think I have about 25 rounds in it. Let's see how the little original open bolt KG9 holds up. Look at that. Perfect function. What a neat piece of history. Guys, thanks for all those years of support. Thank you for shopping at Copper Custom, which is our online store. If you're not familiar with it, please swing by and check out coppercustom.com. We have a lot of great products at great prices. And again, guys, thanks for all those years of support and sticking it out with us here in the cold of Northwest Indiana. Hopefully we'll have some snow here soon, and we'll bring the AKs out for a proper AK Fun Day. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you soon.